Welcome to Legal Aid of Northwest Texas and the Community Revitalization Project. Legal Aid of Northwest Texas is a nonprofit law firm that provides free civil legal services to low-income individuals, families, and groups who qualify for services. The Community Revitalization Project is one of the projects within Legal Aid that provides legal help to low-income individuals and groups and focuses on three basic areas: housing justice, environmental justice, and community development. Legal Aid of Northwest Texas works to advance and protect the rights of millions of low-income people by providing free civil legal assistance to ensure equal access to justice. Our nonprofit coaching team is now happy to present to you our latest project, which is the 501c3 course of classes to support community groups in maintaining tax-exempt compliance. Thank you for joining us.
The purpose of our getting together today is to discuss things that at minimum an organization should be aware of and actively working to improve for the duration of the nonprofit. These are, fiduciary duty. We're going to be talking about officers and directors, and we're going to be talking about an executive committee. And so what all these parts are. We're going to ask Nancy to give us the first session, talk to us a little bit about fiduciary duty. Then we're going to ask a question of one of you. Rose Brazil has volunteered to give us a story that is ongoing, and I think it's worth your time listening to it because it'll encourage you and hopefully give you great ideas for this kind of work. So Nancy, this is your session, if you will take it over.
I have it open here on the side so I can just kind of walk folks through it. Really, The thing to think about for fiduciary duty is you have three main obligations as an officer or member of the board of directors of a charitable organization, right? And these three kind of duties, in summary, are the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. And this is basically saying that when you're a board member or officer, board member of an organization, you're going to put the interests of the charitable organization first when dealing with the business of the charitable organization. And you're going to avoid practices that would suggest self-dealing, right? Or putting your personal interest first. So let's just kind of walk through this. I think folks can see it here. The duty of care: board members actively participate in governance and oversight of the organization's activities. So your nonprofit organization has a set of bylaws, right? Which are basically like the operating instructions for your organization. And as you have board meetings and discuss the business of your organization, you're using care to make decisions in accordance with your bylaws and in accordance with fulfilling the mission of your organization. So you're taking care to put the needs and priorities of the organization first by preparing for the meetings, reviewing the agendas ahead of time, conducting decisions, conducting votes as needed, and recording those activities in your minutes, for example. You're also taking a duty of care by making sure your federal and state filing requirements are being met, and making sure that things are done in a timely fashion, right? Or correcting things when they need to be corrected. Duty of loyalty. This is a big one here. Duty of loyalty: board member acts in the best interest of the organization at all times. This duty of loyalty, if you kind of give an example to contrast it, something that would kind of breach your fiduciary duty of loyalty is something that would lead to self-dealing, right? So let's say you're a board member of an organization that has, and you as a board member sell a property to the organization, right? That would be considered a no-no, a big red flag, because especially if you're selling it at a higher price than than fair market value, it's an example of a kind of egregious example of how you personally would benefit from a decision that the board is making, when as a board member, your duty is to support the best interest of the organization. So not to make a profit, an exorbitant profit on a deal, right? But that's just an example to kind of show you areas to stay away from. But the duty of loyalty, it's that if you would personally benefit from a decision by the board, you're going to disclose those kinds of factors, and you're going to recuse yourself from any type of decision making taking place about it. So like a vote, for example, you would step away from that part of the discussion. The duty of loyalty here is, again, you're putting the interests of your charitable organization first rather than your personal interests, your personal benefits. Duty of obedience, board members should ensure that the organization carries out its purpose and does not engage in unauthorized activities. So again, this is something that, if you think about it, you're a charitable organization, right? You have federal tax exempt status as a way to allow you to fulfill the charitable kind of community type mission that your organization has set out to do. And by adhering to your bylaws, having your kind of nonprofit operations and management adhere to your bylaws, you're able to push forward with your organization's strategic planning and programs and goals. And so that's this here kind of describes your main activities as board members. So fundraising and development is, of course, a key one in terms of having long-term sustainability, strategic planning and performance evaluation. A board is going to have, is kind of the brain trust of the organization and is really prioritizing the programs and activities and services that your organization is going to conduct based on the size of your organization, right? And the trajectory, the 1, 2, 3 year, 5-year plan that you might have. Fiscal oversight, you're keeping business records, you're filing your federal IRS 990 every year, you're sending in-kind receipts to donors as a way to track all of your fiscal expenses, your revenue and expenses. That's of course going to be a key one that Eleazar is going to talk about here when we shift to officers. Selection and support of executive leadership. A board is going to have a key role in deciding what kind of staff to bring on, how much, what kind of reasonable compensation package to offer to an executive director, and kind of getting the team in place to fulfill the organization's goals. Board development, a key factor here. You might start out with a 3-person or a 5-person board, but you might have a plan of growing the board, reaching out to other like-minded people who might have a different skill set, who might have different resources, who might have a fundraising focus. You're looking at developing your team and especially identifying new types of team members that can help you elevate your profile or your programs or kind of partnerships and so on. So that's a good one for, these are all kind of key areas that a board is going to focus on and prioritize with time.
Very well, Nancy. I think this would be a good place to pause. We're going to enter into the next session, which is going to be officers and directors. But you mentioned a couple of things that I would like to inquire of Rose Brazil, who is the executive director and founder and president of Hope for Kids Foundation in Fort Worth. And Rose has been with Legal Aid, with CRP, for over a year. Now it's going to be it's probably going on 2 years now. When she first came in, we developed a great relationship because of the heart that she has for her community. And in September, she came and asked and well, she told me she was having a problem retaining volunteers, and so I mentioned to her, it's not that you have a problem retaining volunteers, is your main problem is that you don't have an active board. What you need to do is you need to go out there and seek out people who have the same heart that you have, and work with them to get them into serve on your board, and they are responsible for the development of the fundraising and the and keeping volunteers involved and supporting the volunteers. Anyway, all that to say, I had asked Rose to come in and tell us a little bit as to her journey, because she has been progressed, and I like to leave her story as a source of encouragement for people who are beginning this journey from the very, very beginning. Rose?
Yes, good morning, everyone. When I first initially picked my board, I picked people who I thought would fit in as people that could fulfill the need in that position. But I didn't realize none of those people, they had the title and education, none of them had the heart. So I was struggling, and I was ended up doing everything myself. So that was very frustrating to me when I had a board of 5, but nobody had an interest. So I went back and revamped that board, and I picked people who had the heart to serve. They had the same passion as I did as to serving people. So I have an excellent board now. I have a board of 9 people, and everyone has the same heart. As of now, next Saturday, March the 6th, we're gonna go out and feed. We have meals for 600 people to feed in Stop 6. Everybody just went in. Once I said it, they just went in, and everybody's putting their opinion and add more and add more. Initially, I wanted to do 400, but it's up to 600 people now.
So you seem to not be having the problem that you were having with the volunteers.
No. Okay. No, when I say something, everybody has the heart. They put their input, and they only help me realize how to do even more than what I asked. So it's not a problem any longer. So
as far as how you went about determining, who you were going to invite the second time, how did you go about reaching out to people? I mean, who did you reach out to the second time?
I called them people that are close to me, that know me and know my heart, and they support me already. So I asked them to be on the board, and they was waiting for me to ask. They was waiting. I wonder why you didn't ask me. I didn't think about it. The closest people to me that know me and know my heart, they already support me.
The people that already, I'm sorry, Rose, the people that already have seen for the years that you've been serving the community,
yes,
they just your friends, the people that
my friends.
Friends
that I did volunteer work with already, maybe in church or different. They have nonprofits, and I help them to accomplish their goals in their nonprofits. So they knew my heart.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to go into, thank you, Rose. We're going to come back to your story. I did want to, share that Rose has had a very difficult time reaching out, but then once she did, what's happening now is something that has taken a lot of preparation. She says, "Oh, I just called them," but I know it's a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of back and forth, and then you had a meeting to invite the board members in, the potential board members to speak about your organization, so they know what you do, but you had a meeting just to showcase what you do and to ask them to invite them to apply to become a board member. So how did that work out?
Everyone filled out an application. They had no problem doing that. So everyone filled out an application, and just last week I sent them an acceptance letter, an honorable letter to each one of my board members, and I put it in a tube. I took the letter and I folded it up, and I did it the old style. I got a wax, and I waxed the paper together, and I had a stamp that I put on there.
Okay, Rose, I want this picture to to come out. So you sent them a welcome letter to the new, how many, 5 new board members?
9.
9.
I have 9.
Okay, so you put the letter in a tube. Explain that, because somebody who might not have been listening maybe missed it. You put a letter in a tube. What's wrong with that picture?
I wanted it to be extra special to them. I
So-
want them to know their worth to me.
So just how did you just describe the letter that you sent them? I guess that's a better way to ask.
I got a certain type of paper, and I had a wax, and I melted the wax in between the paper so it would seal it, and I had a stamp that I put on it. You know,
So you sealed a
I sealed
scroll,
it.
a scroll with wax,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the tube comes in.
And that's where the tube comes in. And I took them to the post office and I mailed it to 9 people. So each one of them should be receiving those in the mail this week. And I also kept one that I'm gonna send them that they can put it in a frame if they want to.
I'm
And it
sorry,
says-
you cut off a little. The last thing you said was what?
I also have one that I'm gonna send as a packet, in their packet. When I finish, I'm gonna send them a packet with everything. And I have a letter that they can also put in a frame if they want to.
Okay, wonderful. So you made it special. You made the onboarding
Yeah.
special.
Yes.
Okay, I want to hear what happens when the first person calls you and says, what were you thinking? This is wonderful, or whatever. That's really a nice way to honor the people and let them know, I am honoring you because of the position that you hold as an officer. And so I think that elevates the expectation on the entire group. So I'm very excited.
And each letter says, it starts off as Honorable Director Campbell. That's his name. It says, we are happy to extend the heartfelt welcome. And it goes on, and it's a whole letter. And at the end, it's thanking them again for their service.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Rose. Okay.
You're welcome.
Nancy had a technical difficulty. She's coming back on. This session is going on discussing the officers and the directors, and I'm going to ask our very own Sam Prince to talk about this segment.
So board members have several duties to the nonprofit that they're obligated to carry out. They have legal and fiduciary duties, which we've just discussed. They hire and set compensation for management and staff. They advance the mission of the organization, and that means that they promote the organization wherever they can, that they work when the board is talking about planning the future activities of the organization, that they work wherever possible to use their talents to improve the that's better. That they use their talents to improve whatever planning is going on within the organization. They, as they're reviewing the practices of the organization, it's their obligation to use whatever they know to make sure that the best governance practices are there, and they observe what the organization is doing and contribute in the form of comments or criticism wherever necessary to maintain the best governance practice of the organization. And then in the community, they become active advocates for the organization and its mission. They work with other board members to develop the board so that it functions as effectively as possible. They serve on committees, and they not only actively contribute to the organization with their time and talents, but also funding, and they help the organization raise funds. Now, the amount that they personally contribute, whatever that contribution is not as important as the fact that they make a contribution. So it's important to note that some board members may not have the capacity to give great deals of money, but they're still obligated to make a contribution of something, even if it's only $1. Board members review agendas and minutes to make certain that they're accurate and that they reflect the discussions of the board as they had taken place. And they plan for leadership within the organization so that throughout the organization's functioning, there will always be capable, qualified, talented leadership that will lead the organization into the future. Did I miss anything?
No, you covered all of them. I appreciated the input on the time and talent and treasure that a board member should be bringing into the organization. And I do appreciate you specifying that it doesn't matter if it's $1, but the board members should be contributing from their treasure as best as they can, showing that they want this thing to succeed. A question for you, Sam, on the board development, on the committees. What do you suppose is the top committees that an organization that's starting should be looking into? I mean, we could just come up with a whole list, but if I'm just starting, I have a board. The only way to get them moving is by putting them in a committee so that they can meet on their own and do whatever they're going to do and come up with some action. What would you say is that should be at the top of the committee list?
Strategic planning, fundraising, board development,
Okay.
and can you roll the
Back
to the first 5? I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I'm having an issue. Technical difficulties.
Governance, I guess.
Yeah, you did mention that one, and it's important that the governance be definitely you need governance, you need fundraising, and you need to have a plan. So I tend to agree with the way that you've organized those. Now, again, I always say the organization should start from where they are. You can't, of course, you cannot set up committees until you have a robust set of volunteers or board members. You can't get into that. So you should have a plan, at least 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, from where you are today to where you want to go. I'm gonna then go forward to the 7 and the executive committee. Before I enter here, I wanted to ask, does anybody have any questions on any of the topics that we've discussed before? I meant to ask before, but I've been handling the technical part as well, so I am a little bit off. Does anybody have any questions on anything that we've discussed so far?
Don't all speak at once.
My name is Regine Green, and I am the Executive Director for Positive Reflection And I do have a question for Rose.
I'm sorry, I have a difficulty hearing Ms. Green.
Me too.
See if I can turn my volume up.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's good.
That's better?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, I don't know what I did, but okay.
Yeah.
I'm not too savvy with this, but I'll just raise my voice. I have a question, and I don't know if this is the platform to discuss it, but it's in reference to Ms. Rose's situation where she obtained a new board, but how do you dismiss your other board? I mean, before you get a new board. So that would be a topic of interest that for me is the process for that and the legalities around it. But I don't know if we can discuss it on this platform. So if not, then Ms. Rose, you and I, if you don't mind, we can exchange information at some point, some kind of way, get our
Okay.
I would like to ask Rose, because she has a specific situation that happened. So Rose, what she's saying is, if you need to replace the board, how do you get rid of the one that you have? It's sort of that kind of a situation. If everybody that's there is not really doing their job. What was your situation? Then we'll ask Sam to chime in and Nancy to chime in as
Well,
yes.
I have a question that's kind of similar to that. Not just pertaining to the board members, but what if it's just the regular officers in the formation of the business and you're still new, but you know that some of them just needs to go because you see already that it's not going through. So it's not, for my question is a little bit broader. The board plus members, how do you go about taking off those names or whatever legally?
Okay, it's all related. I'm gonna ask Rose to tell me what her story was that brought her to need to pursue. How did that develop that you needed a new board? How is the old board no longer on your roster? And then Sam.
One thing I realized that I asked Eliezer, what could I do? So I realized you have the right to change your board members every year. You can do that. I never set a set where you can be here 5 years. I never did that with the first board because I didn't know. So what I did was I replaced them and then I sent them a letter telling them and they could apply again later if they want to.
Okay, now your board was not meeting, was not doing anything. They were not supporting, right?
No, they wasn't doing anything.
So yeah, so that was the situation. It's not as if they were voted in from a higher power that now they need to be expelled. It's not like that. Go ahead.
What I did a lot of times when you start your nonprofit or you know that you need these people. I knew I need these people to start my nonprofit. So that's how they got the name.
I'm sorry, Rose, you broke off a little. Could you repeat the last thing you said?
When you start your nonprofit, it's a requirement that you have these people. So that's how I came about picking them. So I tried to pick the people that I felt like would best fit their position.
Right, but when they didn't have the time or investment into the organization, then what was left was pretty much you, as I understand it. Maybe another
I was doing everything.
So you need to move on and develop your board, right? So
yes.
What needed to be done. You guys are not working. This is what's going on. And since nobody complained about it, I mean, you have to understand the initial board is a board of directors that will shift greatly from the very beginning until whenever. Sam, I'm sorry, I just hugging all the limelight. Do you have any input on maybe a more difficult situation where now you have a board of directors that the bylaws do say you have the ability to stay on for 2 years, and after 2 years you could maybe be invited to stay another 2 years, but then you have to step off. So kind of if it's a historical kind of a thing where, you already are a board member for a long time, and then maybe there's a person that doesn't fit well, how do you go about moving that person out, if at all? If this is sort of like on the Regine, is that how you pronounce your name, Regine? More on her question, is that more like if there's a person there that shouldn't be there, how can we legally, under the regulations, go ahead and get them moved? Sam?
Oh, first of all, when you establish your bylaws, the first thing you should have included is term limits for board members. In the case of Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, each board member has a 2-year term, which can be renewed up to another 3 times. So a total of 8 years they're on the board. Some organizations, they don't have term limits. And as a result, there are some people that hang around for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And at a certain point, the board stagnates because there is no continual flow of new ideas and new energy. In terms of board members that you want to get rid of, outside of simply not reappointing them when their term limit comes up, you could ask them to step back in favor of other people that are more active. And there should also be, as a matter of fact, there should also be in your bylaws rules for removing board members if they're not functioning. So if they don't come to meetings, for instance. In our case, if a board member doesn't show up to, I think it's 2 consecutive meetings or 3 consecutive meetings, then the board can take action.
Very good.
I have a question just to kind of piggyback off of Ms. Green's question and in response to your response, Sam. So for instance, if that's the case, if you were to go through, say, removing the board, is that something that the board would need to vote on? Or if you as the founder of the organization decided to remove the board and you didn't do so at the time that like board renewal time came up, are there any type of legalities or backlash that you could face as a founder, as a nonprofit organization?
It's always best to have the support of your board in whatever decisions that you make. And there are certain circumstances where an executive director taking an action to remove a board member might be considered against the organization's bylaws, or simply not a good practice. So it's always best to have the support of at least a plurality of your board to support whatever actions that you're taking. But you as the executive director are not empowered to remove board members. That is simply because the executive director works for the board. The board doesn't work for the executive director.
Okay. And then my last question, Ms. Rose, do you mind expanding on what your process was and how you went about removing your board? Like just, I guess, not necessarily step-by-step or all your business, but just, what actions you took, how you went about doing it.
Well, they wasn't even interested. So it was just me. They wasn't even interested in participating in anything. So it was really just me. Their name was just on the paperwork. So that's why it was kind of easier for me to do. But then I did send them a letter, explaining to them that they had been removed off the board, and if they wanted to reapply, they could. These were people that they didn't even fill out an application. I just needed the positions filled. So I asked them and they just said yes.
Okay.
And that's how it happened. So
you sent them a letter just saying, hey, you've been removed. Bye-bye.
No, not so abruptly.
Well, no, not like that, but those are my words.
Yeah. But they know. Yeah, they know.
Yeah,
They
uh,
wasn't even interested. So
yeah.
I had no choice.
Rose, I just want to make sure that I interlace your response and Tiffany's question with Dion Primo's question on the how do you remove the incorporators? I think that was the phrase that she used. Again, the incorporators, it could just be one in the state of Texas, is a person that says, I am putting my name down, my signature is here, stating that we are setting this organization for this purpose. That's the whole purpose of the incorporator. The incorporator is not necessarily held to any other account other than to say, yeah, this is a bona fide organization. I'm signing on the dotted line, that, well, on the straight line, that this is what we are incorporating. After that, the incorporator does not have to be a part of the board. Usually the president, founding executive director is, the incorporator. But anybody that lends their name to incorporate, that's not an office position within the organization. That's just for that moment. The initial board of directors is people who say, yeah, I'll be a treasurer, I'll be a secretary. And it's understandable. And Rose knew this from the very beginning. I mentioned to her, the initial board will change, will shift, will become something different in time. So she was aware that it wasn't going to stay forever, but the people that came on only supported her in that moment, and did not become an active board like she is beginning to develop now. Did you want to add anything to that, Rose?
No.
Okay. Anybody else has any other questions? And thank you again for asking all the questions. It's a wonderful
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Nikita Archie. I have a couple more questions, one or two questions about, and I'll be quick, about money, actually. I first want to thank everyone for their time this morning. I'm really enjoying the information thus far. And I wish those of us who are starting up the nonprofit and getting into this space the best of luck.
Thank you.
My question relates to the personal contribution. I want to ask first, I just want to confirm that it's tax deductible as a charitable write-off. And then two, do you contract that or put something in writing separate and apart from your bylaws just for legality purposes if you ask your members to make that contribution?
If the organization is recognized by the IRS as a 501c3 organization, then the gift is tax deductible. You should always add, by the way, when putting this in writing, that the donor should consult their tax advisor. It's tax deductible. I think the phrasing is tax deductible is allowed by law. And then they should always consider that they should always consult their tax advisor because each individual's tax circumstances are different. What was the second part of the question?
Someone answered about putting it in writing, putting something in writing if it's required or if it's just a contribution.
Personally, I would say that yes, when you first recruit a board member, you should always state in a list of one of the things that you're asking them to do, that you're asking them to make a personal contribution. You should make it clear, by the way, that the personal contribution depends on their personal circumstances, but everyone is required to make a personal financial contribution of some kind. That's always best. A lot of organizations don't necessarily do that. And as a result, somewhere around December 30th, we scramble to make sure that every board member is accounted for so that in the next year, when we ask foundations for money, we can say the organization is supported 100% by its board of directors.
Understood. Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. The executive committee is basically, hold on a second. The executive committee is basically the president, the treasurer, and the secretary. So an executive committee includes the board's officers, If you have a vice president, you can have him there. So the reason why you want to have these individuals on a committee, and it's called the executive committee, is because they're the executives, but also it allows for the organization to have more focused meetings. The executive committee's purpose is to set up the agenda so that the meetings don't get bogged down. As you can see here, the board of directors has the fundamental responsibility of providing oversight for the fulfillment of its mission to the benefit of the community, which is what Sam was speaking about before on the core duties. The board sets the direction for the agency, provides financial oversight, establishes policy, and supports the agency's generation of adequate resources to carry out its mission. So the board meetings, we're going to get into, you know, the things that you bring into the board meeting to have a proper meeting. But the board meeting should be all about keeping the momentum, keeping the focus and the growth of the organization. And you do this governing by the bylaws, which basically tells you everything that you need to know as to how the organization is going to vote, what quorum is, when the meetings are, how they're supposed to be run, all these little bits of detail. The more the board of directors understands and is familiar with the bylaws, the better meetings the organization will have. If you have people who have never read the bylaws for the organization, they may come in and try to make a motion for something that's clearly not there. You can't do that because XYZ. The stronger the higher the awareness of the executive director of what the bylaws contain, the better able they are to make sure that the meeting is not steered away from whatever purpose. Okay. The executive committee's role and responsibilities. So again, the executive committee is like the top tier of the board membership. The board of directors of a nonprofit is basically, you have the executive committee and then everybody else is a director. It could be a director like Sam, director of development. It could be a director of, an audit, the audit committee, something like that. So you have all of these different committees and people from the board of directors that are filling them in. The executive committee is the top committee of the organization. Its purpose is, again, to focus and nurture and move the organization and the membership towards the outcome, the mission, whatever it is that they decided that they're going to do. And every time that they meet, it's all about the purpose. We're not going to be talking about something that's happening in another state when we're having a board meeting, when we have business to discuss that we have to vote on. You focus on the point. I mean, it could be a good story that we want to talk about, but when you are on a board of directors meeting to have business, then it's a serious matter. You need to understand where are the numbers. You need to understand why we're doing this kind of thing. So
Eliezer, if I could interrupt for a minute.
Always.
I am the Director of Development of Legal Aid of Northwest Texas. In terms of chain of command, if I can use a military term, even though I was never in the military, I serve at the pleasure of the CEO, the Executive Director. The Executive Director serves at the pleasure of the board. Members of the Board of Directors are directors of Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, but they're not a director as I am. I direct a small function within the organization. Members of the board serve as the overall body governing the organization. So there is a slight difference in terms of title. Board members that have titles are, at least on our board, are chairman, vice chairman, treasurer, secretary. And then there are 2 or 3 other members of the executive committee that make up the executive committee. The executive committee functions when the board is not in session. So the board meets 4 times a year. In the interim, if there's anything that needs to take place, for instance, if we're applying for a grant and we need a resolution of the board, then the executive committee will meet. they will consider supporting the particular grant application. If they do, then they'll approve the board resolution, which will be submitted with the grant application. And then when the board meets, one of the first things that they do is approve the actions of the executive committee before the board met again. That's just the way our board functions.
Thank you, Sam. And I appreciate.
Can I have a quick question? So he said it's a chairman, a vice chairman, and what else?
We have a chairman, a vice chairman, a treasurer, and a secretary. And then we
Thank
have a
you.
couple of other members that are on the executive committee.
Thank you.
So that when the executive committee meets, it is in effect representative of the overall board. That's one of the purposes of the executive committee.
Dion, I also want to point out that these are names that are set up because of the hierarchical complexity of what we're dealing with here. A regular nonprofit, you can start with a president. You don't need to have, I mean, some board members will really like to be called, CEO. I mean, they want that on their name. That's fine. But the important thing is not the title itself, but understand what the function is.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted, and by the way, Sam, thank you for making that clarification, because I had been bouncing back and forth because, your directorship title just put me in awe. So,
well, when you and I are together, Eliezer, you can refer to me as your directorship. Other than it, but in general public, it would just be Sam.
Okay, I'll do that. Rose, I know that initially you had a question, you had a concern, but you had a concern about bringing people on that were not going to be detrimental or negative for the organization. Do you want to talk a little bit as to, that concern that you had about how do I go about picking the right people?
It took me a while to get my board together because I took my time. And I watched each of those individually very carefully just to see where their heart was and what, the type of person that they were and what they really fit. So it took me a while with each of my people. I didn't just pick them. It took me a while.
Once you set up on the ones that you were going to bring them in, what are the titles now? Like, I know that you have different people that work in different places. Can you give us a little bit of the variety of the professions that are now making up your brand new board?
Oh yeah. Hold on.
Go ahead, Rose.
I do have a vice president, and that's because I chose her to be my vice president because I've worked with her at my church, at Mega Care, which we serve other people. So I know that she's a person that will carry on the same things that I did. She has the heart. And I have a business owner, and I have two business owners. One is owner of People's Farmers Market. I have a young lady, she's an artist for 88 Lines. And my vice president is a paralegal, so she knows a lot of legal things. I have a real estate investor, which can help us with property. And I have a senior real estate loan officer. I have a retired educator. I have a police officer, and I have a director. One lady, she's a director of programs of mental health, which can help me with the mental health part and unifying families.
Your police officer happens to be stationed where?
In Stop Six area, in my area. He's stationed in that area, so he's very familiar with the area.
Which is always very good. It looks really good because you have somebody with boots on the ground that can tell you this is going on. So that's great. Congratulations, Rose.
So he's able to tell us about the crime and everything in the area, what the dangers are or not.
And whatever the organization sets up, him being there, your organization has a specific a specific protection, because there's somebody who can go in there and speak about this is going on in this segment. This
Yes.
group is trying to do this, and look what's going on. So it's always good. Thank you, Rose. I know we're gonna continue watching this baby grow, and I can't wait to see how your organization is going to continue to bless the community the way that you do. So you and everybody else, but thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question before we close?
I have two questions.
Okay.
Just kind of in going back to the board. So the first question I have, just in the initial formation of this board, you say, for instance, have, I guess, as you mentioned before, your president, your treasurer, your vice president, and secretary. I know that the president, the treasurer, and secretary are, the necessary positions in order to form that board. Is a vice president necessary? And then also, is it possible for, I guess, the founder or co-founders of the nonprofit to serve two positions within that board when you're in the initial kind of startup phase and the formation and everything, if that makes sense? So for instance, like, would your founder or co-founder would they be considered like the executive director or a vice president or whatever, and then also serve as secretary? I know that was a lot. Sorry.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So it's kind of a two-part question. So basically, what would, I know you mentioned that there's, the treasurer, the president, and the secretary are, the necessary positions in order to, I guess, form that board / executive committee at the beginning of the formation of the nonprofit. Would the founder or co-founders of the nonprofit organization be considered like the executive director or president or vice president, but then also be able to serve as in another position on that board? And are there conflicts of interest there?
It's always a bad idea for a person working for the organization to be on the organization's board in terms of nonprofit governance. The founder would have to decide if they want to be an employee of the organization or they want to be on the board to serve as leadership. Now, as an executive director, you're also a leader, but it's important to note that you're subservient to the wishes of the board. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I kind of got a little bit more confused.
Can I ask a question?
The executive director cannot be a member of the board of directors.
Okay. And so if you are the founder or co-founder, this, obviously you started this nonprofit, you're the founder, and you need to be able to form this board, and you have to have a president, president, secretary, and treasurer. Would you as the founder be able to serve as the president or say vice president of that board?
The founder could serve as any of the officers that are stipulated in the organization's bylaws. That would be fine. And in fact, I've seen founders serve in two ways. One, I've seen founders serve as executive directors working for the board, and I've seen founders serve as chairman of the board or president of the board or just a member of the board, governing the activities of the executive director.
Got it.
So it works either way.
Okay, that's what I was asking, if there were any restrictions or any conflicts of interest in that manner.
As long as the executive director is not on the board, there is no conflict of interest.
Okay, and it's not necessary for there to be an actual executive director in the initial formation of it?
Generally, no, but at some point, if you have employees, there has to be an employee that's in charge of all the other employees.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is the conclusion of this session intended to instill capacity into grassroots nonprofits. The nonprofit coaching team would like to thank you for your presence and attention. We look forward to sharing with you next time.